What if growing older didn't mean growing dependent? What if solitude wasn't the beginning of decline, but the most powerful choice you could make? You've spent decades caring for others, adapting to their needs, their schedules, their lives. But what happens when the house empties, when retirement arrives, when you finally have the chance to hear your own thoughts again? Our society often frames aging alone as something to fear, a condition to avoid at all costs. We're bombarded with images of senior communities, adult children taking in their parents, and warnings about isolation. But what if they're wrong? What if living alone after 65 isn't just acceptable, but perhaps the most dignified and empowering choice you could make? Today, we're going to challenge that conventional wisdom. We'll explore 11 profound benefits of choosing to live independently in your later years. Benefits that can transform what might seem like solitude into sovereignty, and what others might see as isolation into intention. You'll discover how controlling your own space can bring unexpected peace, how setting your own rhythm can restore your energy, and how standing firmly in your independence can actually deepen, not diminish, your most important relationships. These aren't just philosophical ideas, they're practical principles that you can apply starting today, whether you're already living alone or considering it for your future. Before we look into these life-changing benefits, I want you to know something important. This isn't about separating yourself from loved ones or rejecting help when you truly need it. This is about choosing the shape of your later years with clarity and purpose, rather than defaulting to what others expect of you. To help you see this more clearly, I want to tell you a story. Helen stands at her kitchen window, watching the morning light filter through the birch trees that surround her modest home. At 78, her movements are deliberate but not hesitant as she prepares her morning tea. The house is quiet except for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a rhythm that has become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. 10 years ago, after her husband passed, Helen's 3 children had gathered around her dining table with concerned expressions and well-rehearsed arguments about why she shouldn't live alone. They had spare rooms, they reminded her. They could check on her daily. They worried. Helen sits now at that same table, remembering that conversation with a small smile. She had listened to them carefully that day, acknowledging their love and concern. But when they finished, she had something to say too. "I've spent my life caring for others," she had told them gently but firmly. "First as a nurse, then as your mother. Now, I want to care for myself in my own way, in my own space. This isn't about rejecting your love. It's about embracing what I need." Her son Michael had leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "But Mom, what about when you need help? What about when things get difficult?" "Difficulties come whether we live alone or surrounded by people," Helen had replied. "The question isn't whether challenges will arise, it's who I want to be when they do. And I want to be a woman who faces them on her own terms for as long as possible." Today, a decade later, Helen has named her home Hollow Birch House, not out of whimsy, but as a declaration. These walls are hers. This space is shaped entirely by her preferences, her routines, her choices. The bookshelves hold only volumes she wants to read. The kitchen contains only tools she actually uses. Every corner reflects not compromise, but clarity. Her morning routine unfolds with quiet precision. Tea first, then stretching exercises that keep her limbs flexible and strong. A short walk through the wooded path behind her home, never missing a day, regardless of weather. Then breakfast, mindfully prepared and eaten without the distraction of television or radio. Just her thoughts, her food, and the birds visible through her window. Helen's daughter Catherine calls precisely at 10:30 every Tuesday and Thursday. These conversations are rich because they're chosen, not obligatory. When her grandchildren visit, it's an event, not an intrusion or an emergency measure. "I don't want to be a burden," Helen often says, both to herself and to others who question her choice. The most dignified form of aging is one that respects the lives of those you love, including their right to live those lives without constant worry. But living alone after 65 is more than just avoiding dependency. As Helen discovered, it's about creating a third act that is neither a pale continuation of middle age nor a slow surrender to decline. It's about designing a life that honors the wisdom gained through decades of experience. One afternoon, Helen's neighbor Grace stops by with a loaf of freshly baked bread, a kindness that has become a monthly tradition between them. Grace is 68, recently widowed, and struggling with her new solitude. "I don't know how you do it." Grace sighs, settling into the armchair across from Helen. "The silence in my house feels like it's swallowing me whole." Helen pours tea for both of them, considering her response carefully. "The silence was my enemy at first too," she admits, "but then I realized something important. Silence isn't empty. It's full of possibilities that noise often drowns out." Grace looks skeptical. "What kind of possibilities?" "The possibility of hearing yourself clearly, perhaps for the first time in decades," Helen says. "The chance to discover what you actually enjoy, not what you've been conditioned to tolerate. The opportunity to set your life's pace according to your own natural rhythm, not someone else's urgency." "But don't you get lonely?" Grace asks, the question that everyone eventually asks. Helen smiles. "There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I have moments of loneliness, of course. Everyone does. But I've found that living alone has actually made my connections with others more intentional and meaningful. When I see my children or friends now, I'm fully present with them. It's quality over quantity." She pauses, looking at the photos arranged neatly on her sideboard. Snapshots of her family, her travels, the life she's lived and continues to build. "Grace, what I've discovered in these years of living alone is that solitude isn't a condition. To endure, it's a design. It's a choice that can bring unexpected richness to these later years if we're brave enough to embrace it." Grace nods slowly, considering Helen's words. "But how do you manage the practical things, the house maintenance, the technology, all those details?" "One challenge at a time," Helen says with quiet confidence. "Sometimes I figure it out myself. Sometimes I ask for help, but I'm the one making those decisions, setting those boundaries. That's what matters." As the afternoon light shifts, casting long shadows across Helen's carefully ordered living room, the two women continue their conversation. Helen begins to outline for her friend the benefits she's discovered in her decade of chosen solitude. Benefits that have transformed what could have been years of decline into a period of unexpected growth and clarity. What Helen shares with Grace that afternoon forms the foundation of what I'll share with you today: 11 profound benefits of living completely alone after 65. Benefits that Helen has not just theorized about, but lived. Benefits that have allowed her to age not just with acceptance, but with purpose and quiet joy. Before continue, share in the comments. What's one thing you wish your children understood about getting older? Continuing. As we explore these benefits together, I invite you to consider your own relationship with solitude. Whether you're already living independently or contemplating such a change, Helen's experience offers valuable insights into how aloneness can become not isolation, but a form of liberation. Not a last resort, but possibly your best chapter. Because what Helen discovered, and what you might discover too, is that there's extraordinary power in choosing the shape of your later years. In deciding that aging isn't something that happens to you, but something you author with intention. In recognizing that living alone isn't about what you're leaving behind, but what you're finally free to embrace. Let's begin with the first and perhaps most fundamental benefit that Helen discovered when she chose to remain in her own home on her own terms. Benefit number 1, you control your space. The first benefit of living alone after 65 is perhaps the most immediate and tangible: complete control over your living environment. This isn't just about decorating as you please, though that's certainly part of it. It's about creating a space that serves your needs perfectly, without compromise. For Helen, this realization came gradually. In the first months after deciding to stay in her home, she found herself unconsciously maintaining rooms as they had always been, keeping her late husband's office untouched, preserving routines that no longer served her current life. "I was living in a museum of my past," she confided to Grace during one of their afternoon talks. "Until one morning, I woke up and asked myself, if I were designing this home from scratch, just for me, what would it look like?" That question sparked a methodical transformation of Hollow Birch House. Helen converted her husband's office into a reading room with the perfect chair positioned exactly where the morning light fell. She rearranged the kitchen to accommodate her shorter height. She replaced the heavy dining table with a smaller one that better suited her needs. Every item in this house now serves a purpose or carries a meaning, Helen explains, running her hand along a bookshelf. "Nothing is here out of habit or obligation." This intentional approach extends beyond furniture and decor. Helen keeps her home at precisely the temperature she prefers, slightly warmer than when her husband was alive. She plays classical music in the mornings and jazz in the evenings without negotiating anyone else's preferences. Her refrigerator contains only foods she enjoys. These might seem like small freedoms, but they accumulate into something profound. A living space that works as an extension of yourself rather than a compromise between competing needs. For you, this might mean finally painting the walls that color you've always loved, but your spouse found too bold. It might mean converting the rarely used dining room into a hobby space. Perhaps it's as simple as keeping the bathroom counter free of clutter, or as significant as downsizing to a home that truly fits your current life. When your space reflects your authentic self, something remarkable happens. Your environment begins to support rather than drain your energy. You no longer navigate daily friction points, those small but constant accommodations that, over time, create a subtle but persistent stress. Helen puts it simply, "My home now feels like a perfectly tailored suit. I don't notice it because everything fits just right." Benefit number 2. You set the rhythm. The second profound benefit of living alone after 65 is reclaiming control of your time, setting a rhythm to your days that aligns with your natural energy, patterns and preferences. For most of our lives, our schedules are shaped by external demands: work hours, children's needs, spouses' routines, social obligations. Even in retirement, many of us continue to organize our time around others' expectations. But living alone offers the extraordinary opportunity to discover your authentic rhythm. Helen realized this about 6 months into living by herself. "I noticed I was still eating dinner at 6:30 every evening, the time we'd always eaten as a family," she recalls. "But I wasn't actually hungry then. I was eating out of habit, not hunger." She began experimenting, listening to her body's signals rather than the clock. She discovered she naturally prefers a substantial breakfast, a light lunch, and a moderate dinner around 5-2 p.m. This simple adjustment improved her digestion and her sleep. Similarly, Helen found she's naturally most alert and creative in the early morning hours. "By 2 in the afternoon, my mind isn't as sharp," she acknowledges, "so now I schedule any activities requiring focus or decision-making before noon. Afternoons are for physical tasks, evenings for relaxation." This personalized rhythm extends to every aspect of her life. Helen no longer forces herself to socialize when her energy is low. She doesn't push through household chores when her body needs rest. She's learned that there's wisdom in honoring her natural inclinations rather than fighting against them. When you live with others, daily life is a series of negotiations, Helen observes. When you live alone, it becomes a dialogue with yourself. For you, discovering your natural rhythm might reveal that you're a night owl who does your best thinking after dark. Perhaps you'll find you prefer several small meals throughout the day rather than 3 larger ones. Maybe you'll discover that alternating days of activity with days of rest works better for your energy levels than trying to maintain the same pace every day. The beauty of setting your own rhythm is that it allows you to distribute your energy more efficiently. Instead of spending precious vitality adapting to others' schedules or expectations, you can serve and direct it toward what matters most to you. Helen's neighbor Grace initially struggled with this concept. But without external structure, won't the days just blur together? She asked. That's exactly why creating your own intentional rhythm is so important, Helen explained. I'm not suggesting abandoning structure. I'm talking about creating a structure that works with your nature, not against it. Indeed, Helen's days have a clear pattern, but one she's designed herself. Monday mornings are for house cleaning. Wednesday afternoons are for volunteer work at the local library. Sunday evenings are for calling her son who lives across the country. These anchors provide framework without restriction. The freedom to set your own rhythm doesn't just improve daily function, it reconnects you with your authentic self. After decades of synchronizing with others' clocks, this reclamation of time can feel like coming home to yourself. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comments below. Benefit number 3. Solitude sparks creativity. The third benefit of living alone after 65 might surprise those who view solitude primarily as a state of lack. In reality, being alone creates the perfect conditions for creativity to flourish. Whether you've always considered yourself creative or not, for Helen, this unexpected renaissance began with the empty hours. At first, the quiet evenings stretched before me like a desert, she admits. Television and phone calls can only fill so much time. Eventually, I found myself face to face with the question, what do I actually enjoy doing? This question led her to rediscover a love of writing that had been dormant since college. She began keeping a journal, then progressed to writing short stories inspired by her nursing career. Eventually, she started submitting pieces to her community newsletter. The stories were always in me, Helen explains, but they were drowned out by the constant conversation of shared living. In silence, they finally had space to surface. This creative awakening isn't unique to those with artistic inclinations. Living alone naturally encourages problem-solving and innovative thinking. In everyday situations, when there's no one else to call for immediate help, you find yourself approaching challenges with resourcefulness you might not have recognized in yourself. When Helen's kitchen faucet developed a leak, rather than immediately calling her son or a plumber, she researched the problem online, watched tutorial videos, and successfully replaced the washer herself. That repair taught me more than just plumbing, she says with pride. It showed me I could figure things out on my own, which gave me confidence to tackle bigger challenges. This combination of practical creativity and artistic expression creates a powerful cycle of growth. Each successful problem solved or project completed builds confidence for the next endeavor. Unlike creativity in earlier years, which might have been rushed or interrupted by responsibilities, this later life creativity can unfold at its own natural pace. For you, this creative reawakening might manifest in returning to abandoned hobbies or discovering entirely new passions. Perhaps you'll finally learn to play the instrument that's always fascinated you, or take up painting, or design the garden you've always envisioned. Maybe your creativity will express itself in cooking meals that perfectly suit your preferences, or in finding innovative solutions to make your home more comfortable as you age. The key insight here is that creativity requires both inspiration and incubation. Ideas need time and space to develop. Living alone provides both in abundance. Without the constant accommodation of others' needs and conversation, your mind has room to wander, connect, and create. Grace was skeptical about this benefit when Helen first mentioned it. "I've never been the creative type," she protested. "Creativity isn't just about making art," Helen responded gently. "It's about bringing something new into being, whether that's a story, a solution, or simply a new way of seeing your circumstances." Indeed, Helen has found that even her approach to challenges has become more creative. Rather than defaulting to familiar solutions or seeking immediate outside help, she gives herself time to consider multiple approaches, often arriving at innovative answers that suit her specific needs. "Living alone doesn't just give you permission to create," Helen observes. "It actually makes creativity necessary. And that necessity often reveals capacities you never knew you had." Benefit number 4, your energy stays yours. The fourth benefit of living alone after 65 touches on something more subtle but equally powerful: energy conservation. Not physical energy alone, but emotional and mental energy as well. When you live by yourself, you gain remarkable control over how your personal energy is spent and replenished. Helen discovered this benefit almost by accident. 6 months after deciding to live alone, she visited her daughter Catherine's home for a week-long stay. By the 3rd day, despite loving her family dearly, she found herself unusually exhausted. It wasn't just the change in routine, Helen later explained to Grace. "It was the constant attunement to others, adjusting my conversation to each person's interests, sensing the undercurrents of family dynamics, shifting between different people's needs. Even when everyone was lovely, I was spending energy in ways I no longer had to at home." Upon returning to Hollow Birch House, Helen felt a palpable sense of relief. "It was like taking off a heavy backpack I hadn't realized I was carrying," she says. "The silence wasn't just quiet, it was restorative." This conservation of social energy becomes increasingly valuable as we age. While meaningful connection remains essential, many discover that their tolerance for prolonged social engagement naturally decreases over time. Living alone allows you to engage deeply when you choose to, then withdraw to restore yourself without explanation or apology. For Helen, this means she can fully enjoy her weekly volunteer shift at the library, giving generously of her attention and care to patrons. But afterward, she returns home to solitude, reading or gardening to replenish her reserves. Similarly, she treasures visits with her grandchildren, but appreciates that these visits have natural endings, allowing her to rest and reflect afterward. "There's a difference between loneliness and solitude," Helen often remarks. "Loneliness depletes you. Solitude restores you. This benefit extends beyond social energy to emotional labor as well. When you live with others, you're constantly, often unconsciously, managing the emotional atmosphere of your shared space. You adjust your mood to accommodate others, suppress irritation to maintain harmony, and absorb others' emotional states as they fluctuate throughout the day. Living alone means your emotional baseline is solely your own. Your home becomes a sanctuary where you can process feelings authentically without modulating them for others' comfort. This emotional authenticity conserves tremendous energy that would otherwise be spent on emotional management. For you, this energy conservation might manifest as discovering you can sustain more physical activity when it's paced according to your needs alone. Perhaps you'll notice improved concentration when reading or pursuing hobbies. Maybe you'll find that selective socializing, choosing when and how you connect with others, leads to deeper, more meaningful interactions than constant but superficial contact. Grace struggled to understand this concept initially. "But don't you miss having someone to talk to throughout the day?" she asked Helen. Sometimes, Helen acknowledged, but I've learned that constant conversation isn't the same as true connection. When I do speak with family or friends now, I'm fully present because I'm not depleted. The quality of those interactions has improved, even as their quantity has decreased. Helen has also noticed that protecting her energy allows her to be more discerning about how she spends it. She no longer attends social functions out of obligation. She doesn't engage in relationships that consistently drain rather than nourish her. She has gently distanced herself from chronically negative acquaintances while deepening connections with those who share her values. At this stage of life, Helen reflects, energy is too precious to waste. Living alone has taught me to treat it as the valuable resource it is. Benefit number 5. Health becomes sacred. The 5th benefit of living alone after 65 transforms how you approach your physical well-being. When you live by yourself, maintaining your health becomes not just important, but sacred, a non-negotiable priority rather than something to be balanced against others' needs. Helen discovered this shift in perspective about a year into living alone. When I lived with my husband, I often put my health needs last, she confides. I'd skip my walk if he needed something. I'd stay up too late because that was our routine. I'd cook foods that weren't ideal for my condition because they were his favorites. Living alone eliminated these small but significant compromises. Helen now views her daily movement not as an optional activity, but as essential maintenance for her independence. Every morning, regardless of weather, she walks for 40 minutes along the wooded trail behind her house. Twice weekly, she follows a strength training routine using light weights and resistance bands. Movement isn't optional at my age, it's foundational, Helen explains to Grace during one of their conversations. My body is my vehicle for independence. Maintaining it isn't vanity or selfishness, it's practical necessity. This practical approach extends beyond exercise. Helen prepares simple but nutritious meals, tailored exactly to her health needs, lower in sodium than what she used to cook for her family, higher in the specific nutrients her doctor has recommended. She sleeps when her body signals tiredness. Rather than staying up to accommodate someone else's schedule, she schedules medical appointments promptly rather than delaying them due to others' convenience. For you, this elevation of health to sacred status might mean finally establishing the sleep routine that works best for your body. Perhaps it's giving yourself permission to spend money on better quality foods or a fitness program specifically designed for your needs. Maybe it's creating a home environment that supports your particular health challenges without worrying that modifications might inconvenience others. There's something powerfully dignified about this approach to health. Rather than viewing physical decline as inevitable, Helen approaches aging as a process that can be navigated with intention. She doesn't deny the realities of getting older, but she refuses to accelerate them through neglect. My mother used to say that after 70, how you live determines how you age more than any other factor, Helen remarks. Living alone has allowed me to design my life around practices that keep me functioning at my best. When Grace expresses doubts about maintaining motivation for health practices without a partner to encourage her, Helen offers a perspective shift. When you live with others, exercise can feel like something you do for them. So they won't worry, so you won't be a burden. When you live alone, you realize you're doing it for yourself. There's power in that ownership. Indeed, Helen has found that treating her health as sacred has ripple effects throughout her life. Better sleep improves her mood and mental clarity. Regular movement maintains her ability to care for her home independently. Proper nutrition gives her stable energy throughout the day. My body is the house I cannot move from, Helen says simply. Living alone has taught me to tend it with the same care I give to hollow birch house itself. Before we continue, what's one unspoken lesson you've learned after turning 60? We'd love to read it. Back to where we were. Benefit number 6, you learn practical independence. The sixth benefit of living alone after 65 develops almost by necessity. You become remarkably self-reliant in practical matters that many people outsource or delegate as they age. When Helen first decided to remain in her home alone, her children worried about everything from changing light bulbs to managing technology. They saw these practical challenges as barriers, Helen recalls with a slight smile. I came to see them as opportunities. Over time, Helen has developed an impressive array of skills. She's learned basic plumbing repairs, how to maintain her garden equipment, and even how to troubleshoot her computer and smartphone issues. When her kitchen faucet developed a leak, she watched online tutorials and fixed it herself. When her smartphone settings became confusing, she took a free class at the local library rather than waiting for a grandchild's visit. Each time I solve a problem myself, my confidence grows, Helen explains to Grace, and confidence compounds. The woman who was intimidated by her smartphone 3 years ago recently installed a video doorbell by herself. This practical independence isn't about refusing help when truly needed. Helen maintains a list of reliable professionals for major repairs or emergencies. She knows her limitations and respects them, but she approaches each new challenge with the question, can I learn to do this myself? Often the answer is yes. For you, developing practical independence might mean learning to manage your finances independently if a spouse previously handled them. Perhaps it's mastering basic home repairs rather than immediately calling family. Maybe it's becoming comfortable with technology that keeps you connected and secure. The psychological impact of this self-reliance extends far beyond the practical tasks themselves. Each problem solved reinforces your capability rather than your vulnerability. This creates a positive spiral. The more competent you feel, the more willing you become to tackle new challenges. There's a particular satisfaction in figuring things out that I never experienced when others solved problems for me, Helen notes. Even when it takes me longer or my solution isn't perfect, it's mine. Grace worries about safety. What if Helen falls while attempting a repair or makes a mistake with serious consequences? Caution isn't the same as fear, Helen responds thoughtfully. I assess risks carefully. I know when to call for help, but I've found that most of what intimidates us is simply unfamiliar, not actually dangerous. Helen's approach to practical independence is methodical. She keeps detailed notes about home maintenance in a dedicated notebook. When filters were last changed, which brand of light bulb fits which fixture, the dates of major appliance servicing. She maintains a folder of instruction manuals and warranty information. This organization transforms what might seem overwhelming into manageable systems. Independence isn't about knowing everything, Helen reflects. It's about knowing how to find information and solutions when you need them. This practical self-reliance has cognitive benefits as well. Learning new skills and solving novel problems creates neural pathways that help maintain mental sharpness. Helen's regular confrontation with challenges, from programming her thermostat to figuring out why her dryer is making an unusual noise, keeps her mind engaged and adaptive. Living alone means I can't default to letting someone else handle the difficult things, Helen says, and that turns out to be a gift, not a burden. Benefit 7. Financial freedom. Mental freedom. The seventh benefit of living alone after 65 centers on financial autonomy and the profound peace of mind it creates. When you live independently, taking control of your financial life becomes not just a practical necessity, but a path to deep security and confidence. Helen approaches her finances with the same intentionality she brings to other aspects of her life. After my husband died, I realized I didn't fully understand our financial situation, she admits. We had fallen into traditional roles. He handled investments. I managed day-to-day expenses. That division no longer served me. Over several months, Helen educated herself about her resources and obligations. She met with a financial advisor, recommended by a friend, took a basic accounting course at the community center, and created a detailed budget tailored to her new life circumstances. Understanding my money completely changed my relationship with it, Helen explains to Grace during an afternoon conversation. Knowledge replaced anxiety. Numbers replaced vague worries. Now, Helen maintains a simple but effective financial system. Her retirement income and Social Security are automatically deposited into accounts designated for specific purposes: housing, utilities, groceries, healthcare, transportation, and discretionary spending. She reviews her accounts weekly, adjusting as needed while maintaining clear boundaries around essential versus optional expenses. The beauty of managing my own money is that every dollar aligns with my values, not someone else's, Helen observes. I spend very little on clothing or dining out, which might seem unusual to some, but I allocate more for books and garden supplies, which bring me joy. For you, financial freedom might mean finally creating the simplified budget that works for your actual life, not the life others expect you to live. Perhaps it's learning to use financial technology that makes tracking expenses easier. Maybe it's making difficult but necessary decisions about downsizing or reallocating resources to support the independence you desire. The mental freedom that comes from financial clarity cannot be overstated. Helen sleeps better knowing exactly where she stands financially. She makes decisions confidently because they're based on accurate information rather than assumptions or habits. Most importantly, she's broken the association between money and worry that plagued her early widowhood. Financial stress ages you faster than almost anything, Helen remarks. Living alone forced me to create systems that replace that stress with certainty. Grace expresses concern about managing on a fixed income, especially as costs rise. Helen acknowledges the challenge, but offers perspective. Living alone actually gives you more control, not less. When every purchase decision is yours alone, you can be remarkably efficient. Indeed, Helen has found creative ways to maintain her quality of life while respecting financial limitations. She participates in a neighborhood tool-sharing program rather than owning expensive equipment. She exchanges plant cuttings with fellow gardeners instead of buying new specimens. She uses the library extensively and trades books with friends when she wants to own them. Financial freedom isn't about wealth, Helen says thoughtfully. It's about alignment. When your resources, however modest, are directed toward what truly matters to you, there's a sense of sufficiency that no amount of money can create otherwise. This alignment creates extraordinary peace. Helen doesn't lie awake wondering if she can afford to remain independent. She knows precisely what her situation is and what options it allows. This clarity is a profound form of security that permeates her entire life. Managing my money completely is one of the best things living alone has taught me, Helen concludes. It's transformed what could have been a source of constant worry into a foundation of confidence. Benefit number 8. Boundaries are clearer. The 8th benefit of living alone after 65 relates to relationships, specifically the clarity and health that come from establishing conscious boundaries with family and friends. When you live independently, relationships evolve from obligation to choice, often becoming richer and more authentic in the process. Helen noticed this transformation gradually in her connections with her 3 adult children. When they first realized I was serious about living alone, there was concern, even some hurt feelings, she recalls. They interpreted my choice as rejection rather than self-determination. Over time, however, a new dynamic emerged. Helen's children began to see her as an independent person with her own life rhythms and preferences, not simply as mom, whose primary identity was in relation to them. This shift was subtle but profound. Now when my son Michael visits, He comes because he wants to spend time with me, not because he's checking whether I've taken my medication or eaten properly, Helen explains to Grace. The quality of our conversation has completely changed. We discuss books, politics, ideas, not just my health or needs. This clarity extends to all of Helen's relationships. She no longer accepts invitations out of guilt or obligation. She doesn't allow unannounced visits that disrupt her carefully crafted routines. She communicates directly about her preferences and limitations rather than accommodating at her own expense. Living alone has taught me that true connection can't exist without honest boundaries, Helen observes. Pretending to have more energy than I do or saying yes when I mean no doesn't serve anyone in the long run. For you, this boundary clarity might mean establishing specific visiting hours that work with your energy patterns rather than being perpetually on call for family. Perhaps it's communicating directly about how long you can comfortably host guests before needing your space back. Maybe it's learning to say, "I'll think about it and let you know," instead of immediately agreeing to requests. The paradox of healthy boundaries is that they actually enhance rather than diminish closeness. Helen's relationship with her daughter, Catherine, has deepened precisely because both women now interact by choice rather than obligation. Their weekly phone calls are genuinely anticipated rather than items on a to-do list. When my grandchildren visit now, it's a special occasion, Helen notes with pleasure. They know Grandma's house has particular rhythms and rules. That structure actually makes our time together more meaningful. Grace wonders if setting firmer boundaries might offend her family or make her seem selfish. Helen's response is thoughtful. Boundaries aren't walls. They're clear definitions that help others relate to us authentically. The initial adjustment might be challenging, but the long-term benefit is relationships based on reality, not roles or expectations. Helen has found that living alone provides natural support for maintaining these boundaries. Without daily compromises that gradually erode personal limits, she can more easily identify when a relationship pattern doesn't serve her well. Physical distance creates the space needed to establish emotional clarity. My home is now truly my domain, Helen says, gesturing to the serene living room around her. When I invite others into it, the terms are clear. That clarity is a gift to everyone involved. This boundary clarity creates a virtuous cycle. The more Helen honors her own needs and limitations, the more genuine her interactions become. The more authentic her relationships grow, the more they nourish rather than deplete her. This positively impacts her overall well-being, creating more energy for the connections that matter most. Living alone has taught me that solitude and connection aren't opposites, Helen reflects. They're complementary states that, when properly balanced, create a rich and meaningful life. Now please hit the subscribe button if you appreciate content like this. Continuing, benefit number 9, you rediscover your voice, the 9th benefit of living. Alone after 65 is perhaps one of the most subtle yet transformative. You rediscover your authentic voice, both literally and figuratively. After decades of adjusting your thoughts and words to accommodate others, solitude creates space for your genuine perspective to emerge. Helen noticed this change most clearly in family discussions. I used to soften my opinions or hold back thoughts that might create tension, she admits. Now, after years of conversations primarily with myself, I speak more directly, not unkindly, but clearly. This reclamation of voice extends beyond conversation to decision-making. When choices affect only you, you learn to trust your own judgment rather than seeking consensus or approval. Helen now makes decisions, from which medical treatment option to pursue to which community activities deserve her time, based on her own carefully considered values rather than external validation. Benefit District 10. You build stronger, realer connections. The 10th benefit reveals a beautiful paradox. Living alone can actually enhance the quality and depth of your relationships. When connections are chosen rather than circumstantial, they often become more authentic and meaningful. As Helen's neighbor Grace begins to adjust to her own solitude, she notices this shift. "I had more people around me when my husband was alive," she tells Helen during a garden visit, "but I'm not sure I was less lonely. So many conversations were superficial, about schedules, logistics, neighborhood gossip." Helen nods in understanding. "Living alone has refined my social life," she explains. "I no longer spend time with people out of habit or convenience. Each connection is intentional. This intentionality transforms the nature of interaction." Helen's friendships have become deeper, marked by meaningful conversation rather than small talk. Her time with family feels precious rather than routine. Even brief exchanges with neighbors and community members carry more genuine presence. Benefit the first 11, you age on purpose. The final and perhaps most profound benefit of living alone after 65 is the opportunity to age with intention rather than by default. Instead of being carried along by circumstances or others' expectations, you actively shape this chapter of your life according to your deepest values. For Helen, purposeful aging means embracing each day as a deliberate creation rather than something to merely get through. Every morning walk, every carefully prepared meal, every hour spent in her garden becomes not just an activity but an affirmation, a statement that this time of life deserves to be lived fully, not just endured. "So many view aging as a slow surrender," Helen tells Grace, as they sit together watching the sunset from Helen's porch. "Living alone has taught me it can be our most deliberate act of self-authorship." This perspective transforms how Helen approaches the inevitable challenges of growing older. Physical limitations become problems to solve creatively rather than sentences to accept passively. Social changes become opportunities to form new connections rather than losses to mourn indefinitely. Each day becomes a canvas for purposeful living rather than a countdown to be tolerated. As our story draws to a close, we find Helen and Grace sitting together in the gentle evening light. The friendship that began with Grace seeking advice has evolved into a balanced relationship of mutual support. Grace has begun implementing changes in her own home, inspired by Helen's example, but finding her own unique path to meaningful solitude. "I was so afraid of being alone," Grace confesses, "that I couldn't see the possibilities it might offer." Helen smiles, her face illuminated by the golden hour light filtering through the birch trees that gave her home its name. "That's the heart of it," she says quietly. "What looks like limitation often turns out to be invitation, an invitation to become more fully ourselves." As the sun sets on Hollow Birch House, we're reminded that Helen's story isn't exceptional. It's available to anyone willing to embrace solitude as opportunity rather than sentence. Her experience illuminates a path that many of us might walk as we age, showing that living alone after 65 can be not just acceptable, but deeply rewarding. So what might this mean for you? Perhaps you're already living independently and recognizing some of these benefits in your own experience. Or maybe you're considering such a choice, weighing independence against more traditional arrangements. You might even be helping a parent or loved one navigate this decision, wondering what supports their best interests while respecting their autonomy. Wherever you find yourself, Helen's story offers valuable insights worth considering. First, recognize that living alone is not the same as being isolated. Meaningful connection remains essential to well-being, but that connection can actually deepen when it's chosen rather than constant. Quality matters more than proximity. Second, understand that independence requires preparation but pays extraordinary dividends. The effort invested in creating systems that support solo living, from home modifications to financial organization to health routines, yields not just practical security, but profound peace of mind. Third, appreciate that solitude offers unique opportunities for growth that more dependent arrangements might limit. The challenges of living alone often reveal capacities you never knew you possessed. Creative problem solving, emotional resilience, practical skills that build confidence with each success. Fourth, acknowledge that independence is rarely absolute. Healthy solo living usually involves interdependence, knowing when to ask for help, building community connections, and maintaining family bonds from a position of choice rather than necessity. Finally, consider that how we age is increasingly a matter of design, not default. The extended lifespans many of us will enjoy create a new chapter of life, one that our grandparents rarely experienced. This chapter deserves to be approached with intention, not merely accepted as an epilogue. Helen would be the first to acknowledge that living alone isn't right for everyone. Health conditions, financial realities, cultural values, and personal preferences all shape what makes sense for each individual. The courage isn't in making any particular choice, but in making the choice that truly serves your well-being rather than others' expectations. As we conclude our exploration of the benefits of living completely alone after 65, I invite you to consider which aspects of Helen's experience resonate most deeply with you? Which benefits seem most valuable for your circumstances? What first steps might move you toward greater autonomy, whether you live alone or not? Remember that growing older doesn't mean growing dependent. Solitude isn't the beginning of decline, but can be the most powerful choice you make, a choice that honors your journey, your wisdom, and your right to shape the remaining chapters of your remarkable life. The most dignified form of aging is the one you design yourself, with clear eyes and an open heart. Whether that includes living alone or not, the principle remains. You are the author of your later years. Write them boldly, with purpose and joy. Now, tell me, what's one thing you'll do differently after watching this video? Please share with us in the comments. Every day we share content that speaks to the heart. Subscribe and join us. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.